Manny Skretas, an independent cymbal smith, runs Skretas Family Cymbal Company right here in New Braunfels. Being a longtime professional drummer, teacher, and salesperson in the musical field has given him a unique insight into exactly what people in different situations are looking for out of their instruments. Paired with a good ear and practical skills, Manny decided to start his own cymbal company in February of 2023 and was full-time just over a year later. He's also here today with his wife, Caroline, and their adorable son, Luke, who is almost 7 months old. As a very quick aside to this, I just wanted to explain, I grew up surrounded with music. My father's a singer-songwriter. I was very involved in band and choir, and my husband and I met in California at a band thing. So I like to say I know a lot about music and instruments, but I know nothing about cymbals. They are very foreign to me. But my husband is a drummer, Will, and what I've come to learn over the years is that drummers are obsessed with their cymbal. It's a very big deal. To me, it's just a round piece of metal. I'm sorry, that's probably so blasphemous. But it's like a whole nother level of like nerddom to hear Bill about like different cymbals have different sounds, and he describes them like they can be trashy, they can be earthy and bright and warm, and it's just so weird to me. But they're all appropriate for different kinds of music, and I think that's fascinating. One thing that I do know is that cymbals are usually mass produced. It's very rare to be a unique craftsmanship of cymbals, to be a cymbal smith. And Manny custom makes each one of his cymbals by hand. And I think that is so cool that we have that here in New Braunfels. Will's had a couple of cymbals redone. I don't even know the lingo, but by Manny. So anyway, it's just really cool. Their passion is like on a whole nother level. So with that, please help me give a warm welcome to our friend and cymbal smith, Manny Skretas.
Thank you, Justin, for the blasphemy. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Huge thanks to Will and Justin Cymbal for inviting me to do this presentation today. I'm going to be working out of my script here quite a bit because I have a profoundly terrible memory, and I'd rather you get all the information than me pretend that I don't have a bad memory. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. My name is Manny Skretas, and I'm an independent cymbal smith. I run founder of Skretas Family Cymbal Company right here in New Braunfels, as you let you know. The only cymbal maker in Texas so far, as I know, so it's a very rare kind of thing. I'm hoping I can let you into the world a little bit. I make cymbals for drummers fully by hand. I have a couple pieces here that I can show you how the alloyed B20 bronze starts when I order it from Turkey, which is kind of the hub for the art form of cymbal making. And the finished product after I get done with it. So let's see how they sound to start. This one here, I hope you can tell, is the one that I haven't done anything to. Not too bad, but so it's super rough. There isn't a lot of cohesion to the tones that it's spitting out. There's not a lot of brightness. It's trashy, as Jesslyn very astutely observed. But that's kind of the way they're made there. They heat up the metal, melt it all down, they roll it in the rollers, and it has this oxidized crust on it from when they do all the casting and that whole metalworking process. And then this here is the one that's finished. It's worked up with a hammer entirely by hand, just swinging one stroke at a time. That's what builds it up into its umbrella kind of shape that everybody knows that cymbals have, hopefully. And then the shininess and all the lines you see around it is from the lathing. That's how I bring it down to its desired weight and kind of use the pressure to smooth out the surface. So listen to that one. You can do the opposite of all the stuff that was in there. There's a cohesion to the notes that are coming out of it. They're kind of blended together in a nice way. It has sustain. It has a cleanliness to it. A good amount of projection. You can think of the shape of a speaker, of a cymbal as almost like a speaker cone. And usually when you see people playing their drums, the cymbals are kind of faced out this way. And that curvature of the cymbal this way, like a speaker cone, is pushing the sound out this way. So hopefully there's a little bit of a difference you can hear in that, but that's kind of the whole thing. It's a very simple process, but it's also extremely intricate because the transition into what I'm talking about more today, which is the business side of things, is we have a saying called that is shape is sound. And when you're looking at just a metal disc, there's so many intricacies in the shape of the cymbal at the most minute details that are going to affect the sound. So every time that I'm making one, I have to be hyper aware of everything that I'm doing to it. And so that gives you an insight into how I'm kind of mechanically creating the sound that I'm going after. So yeah, that's kind of the vehicle from the transition from the mechanics into the business of it and the philosophy of the whole thing, which can basically be boiled down to two words: personal relationship. And the essence of that is just communication with the customer and being able to understand how to get them the best version of the sound they want, manipulating the specs of the cymbal so that no aspect of the sound is detrimental to any other aspect of the sound, because everything's connected. Like I said, it's just a metal disc at the end of the day. And everything else you do to it affects everything you've done to it. So you got to be very careful, but in order to have the right kind of direction to be careful in, you have to have some idea of how the customer is hearing and even describing the words that they're using for the sound that they want, which is totally different person to person. So the important thing to realize right off the bat is that with any creative business, it's a people-oriented thing. Through whatever it is that you're doing, it always starts at the point where the person is describing what they want to you and how you receive that information. And all businesses are people-oriented at the end of the day, but this one's kind of a different level of that. So to kind of illustrate what I mean, you can picture this scenario. Your faucet breaks in your bathroom. You have to go get a new one as soon as possible. So you go to the hardware store, you shop like someone shopping for something that they need, but they weren't expecting to buy. So you look for something that's the best price. It's going to fit your countertops and your pipes. It's a bonus if you don't mind the look of it, but that's, we do what we can in that respect. So you take it home, you try to install it without jamming any fingers or anything. That's it. It's a very kind of disconnected process. Doesn't matter if you have a relationship with the manufacturer. It doesn't matter if you don't like the company, if you can't get anybody on the phone, or whether the company is willing to make any customizations or anything that's kind of superfluous to a larger scale business. They're there for one reason. And that reason is to make your faucet because you need water coming out of a hole in your sink. That's the whole thing. And if you haven't specifically saved up money for it, which most people don't, you're not really saving up for a faucet, you can kind of resent that unexpected nature of needing to buy something that's going to dig into the money that you were saving maybe to get something that you want to buy. And if there's any, faucet salesman people in here, I'm not picking on you, I promise. It's the thing that came to mind. I got nothing against you, but my business is kind of the exact opposite of that. So you would picture the other side of that scenario. You love playing the drums. You've been dreaming about a new cymbal, saving your money for months and months. You know exactly the kind of sound you have in mind. Maybe you've been following my social media, a couple of other cymbal makers around the world as well. You know exactly the kind of sound that you have in mind. And you know that I've made things that are right up your alley in the past. So you call me, we chat, we pick each other's brains a little bit. Once we figured out exactly what direction to take it, I order materials specifically for your project. And when the time comes, to make sure that all of our notes are right, so that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. We build up the cymbal, I do any necessary kind of tweaks. So we make sure we hit the nail on the head. Once you've approved it, you pay, I ship it to you. And once you receive it, I'll ask you to send me some videos of you playing it because I'm genuinely curious to hear, how you sound playing on a cymbal made just for you. Once you install your faucet, you're not going to have the guy from the company calling you to make sure it went okay. I hope you would. That would be really cool, actually. Might give you some more confidence in that. But the short of it is that I'm lucky enough to be in the business of selling the thing that people get to spend their money on, which is why that personal connection matters so much. It doesn't really matter if you know people behind the scenes of faucet company, or I'm sorry to keep picking on faucets. I really am. In most cases, you'll never meet the people who are behind the scenes of that. You go to the store and you buy the one, you buy whatever one you want, and it's totally disconnected from the person who has designed it. But the personal relationship that I have to my customers in this game are kind of what makes and breaks it, because people are buying something that they're intensely attached to, and that they feel expresses them artistically, and they'll be reminded of their connection to you every single time they lay a stick on that cymbal. So and I can say that from personal experience. People will always be reminded of where they got that piece and the whole process that went into it. So you got to make sure the whole thing is positive for people. And another reason this business runs very differently is because we aren't working with identically replicable products, that have to see as many eyes as possible and compete in selling as many units as possible to the lowest cost, and all that stuff that a lot of businesses have to deal with. And that's basically because of the nature of the product itself being highly unique and customizable. Like this one here is a stock piece that I made, wasn't for any kind of commission. It's just about as basic as it gets. Everything about it is medium, the weight, the profile shape, the bell size, everything is just kind of run of the mill. But this piece that it came from, it could have literally been anything else in the world. And even if I took a hammer and pinged this a couple times, it would totally change the sound to the point where the person who has been searching their whole life for some kind of sound that they want, this might be right for them. And if I ping it 3 extra times with the hammer or take a little bit more weight off of it or something like that, it might not be right for them. So these are the kind of the minute levels that we're talking about with that. But the beauty of it is, on the other side of that, is that each one you make, you only have to sell it once. There are billions of people on the planet, and only one person has to like it enough to buy it. It's comforting and kind of terrifying at the same time. If you make something like this, and there's 8 billion people on the planet, and nobody likes it enough to buy it, it can be very discouraging. But we've been okay thus far. So in terms of marketing, we do want as many eyes as possible, just like any businesses, but they have to be the right people's eyes. And that's where the term niche becomes very prominent. That's the title of this whole thing, kind of running a business in a niche creative field. And with jazz kind of oriented cymbals like this, mostly the people who are buying handmade cymbals are the jazz musicians who like a darker, more complex sound. That's just the nature of the work that you put into that. When it's done by hand, there's more complexity to it. But you're talking about people who have all followed a very similar path in the pursuit of their, whether it's a hobby or career, and so much of it is centered around this one instrument. And the term community is kind of thrown around pretty loosely nowadays, but it definitely applies in this scenario, because the people who are into this kind of thing, they all kind of know each other. Like especially when you buy a vintage cymbal from someone online, chances are you're friends with like 5 other people who have owned that cymbal in the past. And when you post about it that you bought it, they'll remember it and recognize it. They'll send you a message and say, hey, I used to have that, and I sold it to this person, and they sold it to this person. So there's a real kind of paper trail there that's really interesting when you're a part of that community. And these people have, they've studied the same drummers. A lot of them have been to the same schools. They've done the same research. They've used the same words to describe what they want out of a sound. The words like dark and complex, and the words that I've used now to sort of explain it to you are the words that I hear all the time. But it helps me to also be able to think about things in a more abstract way. I had a friend of mine order a cymbal for me, and sometimes the most unclear definition can be the clearest picture of the sound that you want, which is really interesting. And it's not even a sonic term at all. He told me he wanted the cymbal to be well behaved, which, if you know anything about cymbals and drums and stuff, sometimes you can have a cymbal that's really tight and really stiff. Sometimes you have a cymbal that's really loose and really washy and it gets out of control. But you want a nice balance between those, where if you want it to wash out and crash and get really wild, you can easily do that. But then as soon as you switch gears and kind of want it to be more controlled again, it reins itself back in. So I knew just by that term, well behaved, that I knew exactly what he wanted out of it, along with the other things about the sound that he wanted. So it's a really interesting thing to be able to think kind of abstractly in these kind of creative fields. And I assume it's the same with lots of other things. That's just one example. And without being a part of that world yourself that I was describing, the vintage cymbals and the jazz musicians and stuff, it can be really difficult to relate to the customers and have them feel like they can trust you in achieving the goal that they've built so much of their life around, trying to chase this one sound. And lots of people are in creative fields, interior design, graphic design, stuff like that. But in those fields, if there's any in here, I'm not, you're cool. And please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I feel like, I feel like a lot of those other businesses that are creative don't necessarily qualify as niche, like something like this would. And that's not a comment on the importance of those things, obviously, because it's much more important than, me sitting there hammering a piece of bronze all day, in my mind, at least. But, every magazine has to have a cover. Every person has to live in a house or a room of some kind that needs to be designed, but not everyone plays handmade jazz cymbals. In fact, 90% of drummers don't even play handmade jazz cymbals. I'm trying to change that fact. I'm trying to bring everybody to the right side of things. But that's kind of the definition of what makes it a niche business, in my mind. If you don't really like the person who designed the house that you live in, it doesn't really affect your life that much. But when people are expressing themselves creatively through something that you've made specifically for them, the relationship is everything. And I don't want to make everything seem like it's totally unique. Certain parts of the business are just like any other. There's variable costs, overhead management, marketing budgets, and tooling and material costs and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes they take a slightly different form when you're the only employee in a company. But that's mostly in terms of flexibility. All the principles are kind of the same. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but the biggest difference is definitely in the customer relations and the philosophy of the whole thing, as we've talked about. And you have to be open to that thing, because it's not something that is for everybody. A lot of the time I find myself just kind of chatting to other drummers who I've become acquainted with over time, and we're talking about our shared passion and whether or not they're ready to buy a cymbal yet. The one thing I hear all the time is, I'm not quite ready yet, but when I am ready, I'm going to come to you, because you've taken the time to kind of build this relationship without even a promise of a sale or anything. Sometimes it can be, I don't want to say fruitless, because you have planted a seed and there's, you're building relationships within your community, which is always good. But it's just the assurance in community building as a genuine and organic way of building the future customer base that, in my mind, is kind of irreplaceable to this kind of work. And people might be thinking, that's all well and good, but when you start a business from the ground up, maybe if you don't know anybody, how do you start building these relationships and connecting with people from scratch? We had some of that too, because I was born and raised in Canada. My wife and I were living in Canada for a couple of years before we moved here. And then when we moved to New Braunfels, that's when I started the business. So I didn't really have any connections aside from the people that I had just met going to concerts and going to jam sessions and stuff like that. So it's like anything else. You got to put yourself out there. But this is also where the big bad behemoth of social media comes into the picture big time. It can be an annoying thing, but it really is the basis of this whole field. This is where people go to engage in their interests. They're at work all day doing whatever they do. And then when they come home and kind of start scrolling on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, who are they following? They're following the people that are doing something that interests them. And that's where we kind of slide into that in the social media side. But many people who have done social media for bigger companies in more standard business fields have usually been trained to keep the pages and content they're working on strictly professional. And the reasons for that are apparent when you're trying to maintain a safe distance from your customer base as a company with an image to uphold. And there is an element of that with any business in mind as well. But we're kind of developing a pattern here. But the opposite is true in a niche creative business. Having a personal presence on your social media to give people a connection, not just to your work and to your product, but to you specifically, is the reason that I think my business and other businesses like mine have grown at all. And one of the ways that I did that is that I leveraged my old personal Instagram account where I used to post my own drumming and cymbal nerd kind of videos to get that follower base of people that I already knew kind of off the ground. And those people who knew me for my passion and the jazz music and the artistry of the cymbal making and everything like that. So that gives you a solid foundation for word of mouth to grow in business organically. When you have people who already know who you are, they'll talk to their friends and say, "Oh, you know Manny, right? He started making cymbals. You should check out his page. It's really cool what he's doing." And those people the people will be a lot more confident to check you out when they're not hearing that from someone who doesn't have a connection already to the person they're talking to. And as the marketing budget grows and techniques develop to try and reach new people, I've always made sure that those new people are following me for the same reason as my old friends were. One thing that we know about people as a whole is that they love to feel included and involved in stuff, and that's kind of the crux of the whole thing. If you just post your stock and your sales and any marketing material and stuff like that, people don't necessarily feel connected to it in any way. That's why I post about my family and my hobbies and shows I go to. I wish people well on holidays, all that kind of stuff. There has to be a balance to it, obviously. They don't just want it to be a personal Instagram page. But there has to be a good balance there, and people want to see that kind of thing. They want to know, it's clear that people are much more likely to support my business when they can see exactly where their support is going. They see somebody with the same passion as them who has a growing family, and they can see the actual, when you buy something from a really large company, you don't always necessarily see where that money is going to, especially if there's investors involved and stuff. You don't really know. You don't see the paper trail of, you buy a cymbal and then, there's food on someone's table, which obviously with big companies that does happen, but people do like to see the immediate consequences of that. Yeah, and once they feel like they know you, they kind of trust you to make the sound they have in your head a reality because they know that you're understanding what they're saying. So, if you're in a business like this, try warming up your social media. Don't treat it like a cold, calculated marketing tool. I used to work at a music store back in Canada. And I've been saying this for years at this point, that we're kind of back in the era of personal service. You talk to anybody, regardless of age or how much they shop online or anything like that. People don't want to talk to robots, and you can't get anyone on the phone, and you get transferred to 5 different departments to be put on hold. And people don't want to wander through a store trying to find what they want, and then when they find what they want, they found 6 different versions of what it is, so they have to open up their phone and try to do some comparisons in an old warehouse where there's no reception or anything. So I know I get irritated by that stuff all the time. So people genuinely like to have that assurance that someone is going to be there who's happy to be a part of the process with them and make it easier and more pleasant, more accessible, so they have confidence that they have someone to go to the next time that they need help with something. So you can be present. That's a big thing. When you call my number on my website, that's my personal cell phone. When you email me, that's my personal email that I read it and reply to it personally. When you schedule an appointment for a modification or to pick up some stock, you come to my house and you're testing your cymbals on my personal drum set, like Will has done a few times. And So that's what's missing from a lot of smaller businesses in general, whether they're a creative field or not. I think that in order to grow, or the people in these businesses think that in order to grow, they have to depersonalize the experience, and especially in the creative field, but it's growing more into the experience and other businesses too. The opposite of that is what people want. So it comes from an openness and a willingness to connect, and coming back to how that translates to social media. You can do stuff like show your process occasionally. I've posted a few videos and hosted some live streams and stuff like that of me sitting there hammering with the sound turned off, obviously, because then no one would watch it. They just hear the banging over and over again. But you can ask people questions and advice of what kind of stock they want to see more of. Don't be afraid to open yourself up a little bit. It may not seem like it, but when the customer comes to you to finally get the sound that their hands on the sound that they've been dreaming for years, that's them opening themselves up to you as well. So you can kind of relate that back to them and make sure that they know that they can trust you and that you're going to be just as open with them. And we have a unique responsibility to them to really understand them, not just about their wants and needs of their sound, but how they play, how they, you kind of want to study each person that you're working for, how they handle their sticks and their style of playing, their goals, their favorite artists, all that kind of stuff. And the most important thing is just to be honest with them. That really goes for any business if you want to be successful in the long run. For example, sometimes I mess up cymbals. I was just telling Will and Jeslyn before that I had a different cymbal that I wanted to bring and put up on the stand that I made a couple days ago, but it kind of twisted up on me. So I wanted to bring something nice so you can see the process when it goes properly. But and obviously it's the blanks and the tools' fault. Like any good craftsman, I know to blame the tools first. That's how you got to do it. To be honest with yourself, really. Some people might have the idea to do as much extra work to it as possible, to hide it and kind of turn it into something quote unquote unique that can sell for just as much. And it's tough for me to say that, because when you're talking about the sound of a cymbal, anything really goes as long as it serves the purpose that the customer is looking to get out of it. If it's a really wild, kind of trashy piece that's all warped and bent out of shape and everything, if the person likes the sound, that just is what it is. But there's a personal thing for me in knowing that the intention of what I created was not what happened, and trying to mask that to sell it as something that did go the way I wanted it to, and selling it for full price. So that's just more of a personal thing for me. But if the person likes the sound, they like the sound. So that's not, I'm not really trying to, I'm not trying to, you know what I'm saying. I think that what that does for me is that people who follow me, they appreciate the fact that I don't have to display an image of perfection at all times. It gives them the confidence that I'm being honest with them during all times of our process. If they've commissioned something from me, they know that I'm not going to screw up the cymbal and then say, oh no, this is actually what you want, all that kind of stuff, trying the sales tactics. And it also just reminds them that there is a person laboring behind all these instruments at the end of the day. When we talk about cymbals that are mass produced, or really anything that's mass produced, people tend to forget that even in those places, there are people working behind all this stuff that really do want to get you the best product possible. But that is kind of magnified in this scenario where you have someone not using any machinery, mass producing anything. They're really putting themselves into each piece directly. And so that helps the people be more confident in what you're doing for them. And the big companies, they're good. They make perfect kind of machine-made cymbals and pump out hundreds per day. And if that's what you want, that's totally cool, because there's a place for that. There's millions of drummers in the world. People are starting new every day, young kids getting their first drum set. And, somebody has to take care of getting the cymbals in those people's hands. They're consistently built, reasonably priced. They're easy to replace if something happens to them, especially with kids. They'll be trashing things a lot. They don't really know that side of things and what goes into getting them those new cymbals and everything. So, So that's all well and good. That's totally cool. But the reason that people come to me in the first place is to get away from that. So I have to understand that and know that they've explored that world for a long time. They feel like they've learned enough about their playing style and their sound to really invest in something that is personally catered to them. And you know, I was talking about vintage cymbals before. I own some cymbals that I play that are 70 years old. So when you really find a sound that you love and you treat it well and stuff, these are lifelong investments that people are making. So having that respect for people who are willing to buy something from you that they're going to play and get to know the rest of their life, maybe pass it down to their kids or whatever it might be. So that it's a really amazing thing when you get down to it. And the crux of that whole thing is that transparency, integrity, for the sake of longevity, is the name of the game in any business, really, but especially in one that's as emotionally attached as this. So after all that, I think the whole thing still boils down to one phrase that I'm always reminding myself of to keep everything running smoothly, and that's this. I don't sell what people have to buy. I sell what people get to buy. And, that's something that I'm thankful for every day. So thank you so much for listening, and we can take any questions now. And thank you for coming.
After you've done all the talking and everything, and you get down to actually making the cymbal, how long is that process? And also, do you have any idea how many hammer strikes you make per cymbal?
I have thought about that, yeah. So when I make, like, say this is probably the most common thing that I make. This is a 22-inch ride cymbal. So that, depending on what it is, it'll take me somewhere between 2 and 3 hours to get from this to this. And it's a couple thousand hammer strokes at least per piece. Something like this, where I'm trying to go for a smoother surface and more traditional kind of sound, the hammer strokes are really close together and the whole surface is kind of smoothed out with the hammering. So it's really I have to go to the gym and work out just the left side every couple times a week. But yeah, that's it. Yes.
You are, by your own admission, in a hyper-focused niche market, and it's very interesting what you're doing.
Thank you.
And you are selling something that, like you said, people get to buy. They can go buy the cheap one on the shelf. What advice would you have for someone who's in a new market? How do you, without coming across as stealthy, how do you present your product or your idea as something that's worthy to buy? And what's been your most effective marketing besides social media? How do you reach people that maybe they don't know they need that? I mean,
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, the best, aside from social media, getting to people is really just going out there, going to local jam sessions. Jazz musicians love to have jam sessions at local bars and stuff where they all have an open mic kind of thing. So what you have to do is make a few cymbals, bring them to the jam session. Whoever the drummer who's hosting the jam session is, get to know them a bit, talk to them and say, hey, look, I'm a cymbal maker. This is all my information and stuff. I made some cymbals that, I want to kind of get out there in the community. Would you be interested in playing some of them tonight? And I can tell you 100% of the time that those drummers who have been playing the same cymbals that are usually bought from a big company, especially since I'm one, there's so few people doing this. They're from a big company. They've been playing them for a long time. They know what they sound like. They're like begging to get to play something different. So they're always receptive to that. And then you do that enough times and it kind of grows and snowballs to where they tell two friends and they tell two friends. And it kind of goes from there. So being on the ground, it's just like any other thing. I've been to a couple of trade shows as well, bring your stock, and a whole bunch of people come in and you give them information. So it's just like any other business from that standpoint. You got to be out on the ground talking to people. And the way I kind of sell it to people, especially after COVID, when the prices of things have gone up and everything, a lot of the times my cymbals are actually cheaper than some cymbals in the same kind of sonic realm made by the big companies. So that kind of helped me. But even if they weren't, you kind of sell them on the personal relationship with them. I tell people, we can use Zildjian cymbals. I feel like most people have heard of Zildjian cymbals, big company that makes them. They make incredible stuff. I've played them for many years. But, if you get a cymbal and you try to call them and say, hey, I want a little bit more weight off of it or blah, blah, whatever little modification you might want to make. You're never going to get somebody on the phone. First of all, they don't do that, but you're never going to get somebody on the phone who really even knows what you're talking about. The guys who are in there doing the hammering and stuff, even though for the past 20 years or so, it's been all machine processing. There's nobody in there doing the handwork anymore. So it's kind of that level of personal connection that I mentioned in the presentation that I'm talking about. When you call me, you get me. I know exactly what cymbal you bought. I know exactly how it sounded. And when you explain to me what more you want out of it, I say, yeah, bring it back to me or send it back to me, whatever it is. I'll do those little tweaks. We'll make sure it's approved before you get it. And that's it. So people really, really respond to the fact that you're open to keep them happy in that way. And when your prices are just about the same as the big companies, it's a no-brainer for a lot of people to get something that's tailored just to them.
That symbol, how much would that be if somebody, because we have no frame of reference.
Oh, yeah, this one here is $660. That's what a 22-inch cymbal goes for. And a lot of the ones in, Zildjian company, they're in the 700 range now.
What would be the most expensive one that you sold that's like super specialized?
It was a big one. It's not so much based on the process, it's based on the size and the cost of materials and everything, because a lot of them, the process is fairly similar to get it to the end point. The time that I put into it is about the same. But the 24-inch rides, the really big ones that I've made are $700. And that's, pretty good. But then if somebody's buying like a vintage cymbal, which these are the methods that I'm using as well. The old Turkish methods that they've been using for the past 400 years in Turkey, this is what we're coming back to. Just a guy sitting there with a hammer and an anvil, no machine presses, nothing like that. So people are, and those cymbals can go for, thousands of dollars, the original Turkish ones. So trying to hit that sound, and somebody who is in that market and who has played many of those cymbals and knows what people are looking for from those sounds, going back to those methods and making sounds that represent those old sounds, but for a quarter of the price, that's what people love. I think this gentleman was next.
Anybody famous yet?
Sorry?
Have you sold one of your cymbals to anybody famous yet?
A few. In fact, I've sold to some people who are sponsored by the big companies and they buy from us independents under the table because the big companies just aren't doing what they need anymore. I think I might be out of time here, so I'll take time. Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
Did I hear correctly that you use a lathe to weight?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, it's what people here think about a wood lathe, where they have the 2 points that connect there and they're kind of doing it lengthwise from this side. The only difference is that I have a motor that turns the lathe facing me like this, so the cymbal is spinning this way, and then you can see the lines there, how I cut it from the front and back. So it's the same kind of process. Yeah. That's good?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much.
For being here, that's really interesting. Never had any exposure.